Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I am Ross Morasso with my guest today, Master Reiki practitioner Annie Baker Atwood from Blue Hill up in Maine, but actually available to you all over the world. Annie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, Red Boots Reiki. For those of us, you're actually a returning guest to our show. For those of us who have not heard you before, tell us how you got your start, your start in this path down the Reiki world.
Yeah, I got this start because I thought Reiki was the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard of. And I knew I had healing hands because I would go, and I would meet with people, primarily athletes. Being an athlete, when you're in your 50s, you kind of hang out with athletes, and athletes typically have injuries. And I would say, "Oh, I have healing hands. May I touch?" And of course they would say yes. And they would always say, "Oh my gosh, my knee, my ankle, my wrist, my elbow feels better." And so I thought, well, I should probably think about this. Didn't want to do massage. And this word Reiki kept coming up. And I thought, well, that's really ridiculous that you could heal somebody without touching them. But I'm a curious learner. So if something feels ridiculous to me, I'm going to go and research it. And I went and researched it, signed up for my first class, and realized that not only was it a language that I didn't know, but I was fluent in it. And so within a month, I had started my business.
So this is something that is taught to people how to do Reiki.
Yes. To do Reiki on others is taught. I went through level 1, which was 16 hours. Level 2 was 16 hours. And then the master's was over 6 months and a gazillion hours. No, I don't know how many hours, but it was a lot because there was just a lot to learn.
What are some of the things that they are teaching you? Like, give us an overview a little bit of what this training looks like.
So in Reiki 1, you just learn where your energy centers are and how to charge yourself up. Reiki 2, you can charge other people up. And it's very kind of, the way I looked at it was, I don't need to be a Reiki master to be able to put on a Band-Aid. I can charge people up without being a Reiki master. Once I hit Reiki master, it becomes a lot more, I'm able to not just charge you up, but I'm able to find the injury and really alleviate the pressure around that injury. So similar to acupuncture, we need to know all the meridians. We need to know the meridian points. We need to know how to remove energetic blockages, very similar to what acupuncture does with their little needles. I've never had acupuncture, so I don't actually know. But people who have had acupuncture and who've worked with me with Reiki say that it is a very similar feeling of, oh, energy is moving now. Some of the other things that we learned how to do were to facilitate the family of someone who is dying. So I did this with my sister when my mother was dying, to be able to see where she was in the process of death. So I could support my sister in saying, okay, mom doesn't have any feeling in her hands anymore. You need to, be touching her cheeks. You need to have your hand on her forehead. Here's what she needs to hear. So yes, being a death coach, which is the opposite of a birth coach, but very important, as well as learning how to send Reiki and work Reiki on groups and people who are not in front of me.
Hold on a second. Let's talk about death coaching. Now, it's a pretty creepy term, but I think what you're talking about is to help those of us to prepare for the loss of a loved one, right?
Yes. And also to understand the stages that, similar to birth, when a child is birthed, they're birthed head first, typically. And the first part to enter into being a into being a land mammal is the top of their head. And so death is the opposite. So your spirit leaves your body and gathers and then exits through your crown.
So go ahead.
And there's distinct stages to it, just like there's distinct stages to the birthing process. And we're trained to be able to see where someone is in that stage and coach the family to support the exit.
So in the case of your mom, was she not aware or unable to speak?
Yeah. She really wasn't cognizant. She was old and was definitely dementia, and her body was just ready to be done earthbound, and her spirit was ready to move on. And so she was very much determined to do it on her time frame because we all thought, and she said nope, she wasn't going to go on the 1st of November because that was just too crowded, because that's Day of the Dead. And so she died very early in the morning on November 2nd. This was a while ago, but she was, the visualization was there, and she was funny. She was just herself to the very end. But it was helpful for my sister who was with her to hear this. She's not in pain. This is what she's seeing. This is what she's able to, this is where she is. This is how she's transitioning. This is the visualization. And it was just very comforting for my sister.
And it seems like too, like as our, spirit is leaving us, and so the body also on a physical level, perhaps shutting down in stages as well. Yes. Then it sounds like part of what you do is to give us alternative ways, however, at a diminished capacity, because if our loved one can no longer speak or isn't as conscious normally, but still other ways to continue to communicate with them, to let them know that you're there and around.
They hear us, similar to a baby hears everything we say, but only starts to speak in very small, little babbles. But the anyone who is nonverbal can really understand what you're saying. And so encouraging someone who is dying to enjoy the other side, enjoy the light, go to the light. It's very hard for someone who's dying if somebody says, oh, don't go. I don't want you to leave, because then they feel conflicted. And so please don't say that. You can say, I've enjoyed my time with you. I will miss you, but I know that it's time.
Right. Happy to have you here for any minute you want to stay, but it's your call.
Yes. Yes.
Tangentially, this brings up kind of another conversation, when dealing with death, and then even also throughout our entire life, there are belief systems out there, whether it's through a structured religion or just personal experience or a, non-denominational sort of spirituality that we develop over the years. How do our beliefs interact with the Reiki experience or our ability to get benefit from it?
That's a great question. And there's a lot of terms in self-help and self-growth and self-development that kind of get bandied about, and everybody assumes that you know what they mean. And pretty much everybody has a different explanation of the terms. So one of the ones that comes up a lot is the term limiting belief. And you must get rid of your limiting belief if you want to do anything else in your entire life. And Then it goes on, limiting beliefs were, put in place when you were very young. And so it's like, oh my gosh, by the time I was 7 years old, I've completely blocked everything in the future. You kind of get that anxiety and guilt. And it's not true. It's not true. There are limiting beliefs. And the way I like to explain it is, imagine the most tricked out car in 1970.
Okay.
It did not have anti-lock brakes.
Right.
It did not have a GPS. It probably did not have power steering. I think that came in the 80s.
Or cruise control or whatever, right?
Right. There were so many things that we've evolved into our cars, just our standard cars now. If you compare it to a tricked out car in the 70s, our safety features are, just off the charts. But in the 70s, that was the best deal available. And so a limiting belief is when you come to a conclusion, what is the best deal available? And then it's up to us to update that best belief available, or the best option available. In cars, it's pretty easy because I don't know how often you update your car. Mine's every 10 years or so. I drive mine to the very end. And so every time I buy a new car, I get sticker shock because I'm, 10 years behind. But I'm also excited about things like, a heated steering wheel. That really made me happy today. So with something that's tangible, it's a lot easier to update. But with your beliefs, it's harder because you can't see them. And so you don't necessarily know they exist, but you're acting as if that's the ultimate. So similar to a car in the 70s, if you wanted to see the rear view, you turn around and you look. Now we have little cameras and all kinds of things to help us park and help us back up. But something with how you view yourself academically, how you view relationships, your relationship to money, your relationship to kind of overall safety, your relationship to food scarcity, those types of blocks, limiting beliefs, reactions, you can track back to when you were little. So one of the ones for me was there was some major crisis where there were a lot of gas lines, and I was pretty young, so I don't really remember, but I just remember always being told, always fill your car up full when you have the opportunity. I remember that so much from my father. And so to this day, it really annoys me when somebody just fills their tank up halfway. And it's, not a limiting belief that's going to, mar me forever, but it's one of those things where I took that as, this is the absolute way it has to be. And because in the 70s, during that gas crisis, you didn't know when you were going to have the opportunity again. And so you did fill your car up when you had the opportunity. So there's, in relationship, are you part of a big family? Did you need to kind of wait for your turn to be called on? Were you needing to, argue for airtime? Those types of experiences can affect how you are in a big business meeting. there's some people who go in and they assume that everybody's going to listen to them. And there's others who sit back and they wait to either be, asked what they think, or they wait until there's an opportunity and then they like pounce and it's kind of aggressive. So that's one example that definitely impacts you at a business meeting.
That's actually pointing to two things, So in your first example of a car, so like I remember I was actually flying to New York City on September 11th and got grounded in Cincinnati. And then I was lucky enough to actually know somebody who was at the airport. And then we had to try to find a car. Gas stations were, excuse me, sold out of gas, right? And so I too, along that example you're saying, feel it's silly to not fill up completely with gas, right? Not necessarily silly, but I feel the pull to fill it up all the way. But in that situation, what I don't have are 7 times in my life where I couldn't find gas, right, for the car. Yet that one single time was enough to kind of get me thinking about that, right? And it was very unpleasant, and there was a swirl of stress and fear in the nations like that. And then your second example about being like the ignored child or whatever, having to compete if you have a large family, right? That's now a situation where you got probably reinforcement over time, right? And then not only am I hearing you about how this manifests physically, like in your office meeting example, but then also it seems like that could play to your entire self-worth, right? Like my opinion doesn't matter, right? Something like that. So, and briefly, for any of us who had tuned in the middle here, I'm talking with Annie Baker Atwood, Reiki Master out of Blue Hills, Maine. And you can find her at redbootsreiki.com. So we're having a conversation right now about limiting our beliefs and how that can affect us in our world. So bringing those two examples, and maybe we could come up with a whole bunch of other ones, but I like them because there's like a single event of trauma. And then there's this ongoing sort of micro reinforcement that happens over a long time.
Yes.
So we have these things and it creates our behavior. So now I'll say, why are you telling me this? So like what I'm interested to know is like, what can Reiki do to help us break these cycles?
That is why I'm here. Reiki to the rescue. So some things, when you can pin it down to a single event, like your event, it's pretty clear to you that, okay, my desire to always fill my car up when I can stems from a single event. And so I can understand that. I probably wouldn't need to clear that with you. You're good. The circumstance of always having to compete to have your voice heard, that's going to take more, because that's going to be an ingrained pattern. That's going to affect your throat chakra. That's going to affect your heart chakra. And that's also going to affect your root chakra, which is the basis that everything is built on. And so in those circumstances, you can recognize, oh yeah, but it takes a lot more to clear it if it's layers and layers and layers of compounded experiences. So in an example of always having to compete for attention in a big family, some of the ways that manifests, it can manifest in a business meeting where you don't feel heard. And so you kind of get whiny a little bit about your thoughts. It can manifest in choosing unavailable men, because your pattern is, I have to compete for attention. And so therefore, I'm going to put myself in relationship with someone who's not available. Now, there's a lot of ways that somebody can be not available. They can have addiction. They can be working a lot. They can be just away a lot. There's a lot of jobs where somebody just isn't home. Or they could be, a lot of other emotional things that I don't really want to get into right here, because it starts with you, and
Yeah,
it
but I get
starts
it.
with,
Sure.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, narcissism, abuse, there's a lot that can get put into a simple imprint of needing to compete as a girl for your father's attention.
So let me pause you on this. So basically, you're out in the world and you're looking for a romantic partner. Okay. And so you're at the bar and, or just in your conversations, if you're doing online dating, what have you, pick your medium to actually do it. But using your example of our fictitious woman here, she starts to hear this gentleman start talking about his busy life, or maybe if it's in person, notices body language or whatever, or a closed offness or whatever. And so you're saying that, and
that's really attractive.
Right. So we can use this as all sorts of other examples, but in this particular example, she would have almost like a subconscious attraction to this person, even though this is probably setting her up for a lot of heartbreak. I've heard the phrase in the past, I'd rather go with the evil that I know. Right.
Yes.
And so there is our reptilian brain that's designed to just predict all the time. That's why it's there. Predict, 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 right? If our reptilian brain ruled everything, we'd get a nice house, get a padlock on our closet, and never come out, right? If it had its way. So, and that's biological from the brain part. And so what I'm getting at is there also then, I think what you're saying is there is an overlap to the metaphysical that will further have us or reinforce, like with this blocked up energy, as you're saying, as one example, perhaps, and almost between the two, like we're almost like compelled to continue on sort of a self-defeating path.
Yes. And that is exactly what a limiting belief is. And so in order to clear it, first you have to recognize it.
I was going to ask you that real quick then. Does Reiki assist with the recognition of limiting beliefs, or is that generally discovered elsewhere?
Some. Not inherently, I would say. I would say that would be a conversation that I would have with somebody and kind of noticing. But if somebody comes to me and says, I want to clear out the energy from my ex, I know exactly how to do that. But they've already recognized that the impact of their ex is not needed energy anymore. They don't need to be in that pattern. And so then I can clear it.
So let me ask you. So I'm asking you about this because people, if you want to go to Red Boots Reiki to engage you in, to figure out how some of this works, right? So somebody could come in and just say, I'm just feeling sluggish, whatever. I want to give this a shot. I have my friend swears by it. Yep. And then during your session with them, you may start to feel something messed up.
Yep, I can really feel, wow, your throat is blocked, huh? Okay, and then I start asking questions.
Right, so then you could potentially, even if they wouldn't know maybe in that session the why, you can at least start to tell us there's something, maybe, but temporarily, right? Then they could come back. And have you ever noticed that? Like they come back in numerous cases, like you always keep getting blocked in the same spot. So you're doing something out here that's specifically going at this. Like has that happened with you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm like, oh, yep. You're still with them, huh? Okay. All right. Let's strengthen you up. Let's see what we can do to move you, to unstick you. Right? Because people get stuck because they are more invested in making a relationship work and fixing the other person than they are in realizing that that person has no interest in being fixed. They think they're perfect just the way they are. Same as I don't want to be fixed. So if someone comes in and says, you'd be perfect if, kiss of death. And that happened a lot in high school. And I was like, oh, wow, I must, jump through these hoops in order to, be acceptable. And that's a pretty common thing for, I don't know, women, maybe men too, I'm sure. But you don't have to. You don't have to. You really do get to be you in a relationship. And Reiki can make you just feel really positive about who you are and how you stand and your strengths. Reiki is very strengths based. And we use the strong chakras to bolster up the ones that are taking a little longer to transmit. But yes, if you come to me and you've already identified it, it goes really quickly. If not, there's a whole set of conversations that happen so that we can kind of find it. And once we find it, it's really a lot easier to turn it around. It takes a while to undo habits, but
right.
A habit is a choice and choices can be made. So,
well, recognizing our problem is the step one to getting rid of it, right?
I used to have a big sticky note on my fridge. If I can see it, I can clear
it. So have you ever found your sessions, delve into almost like a mini therapy session there? Because something comes up for people and now they want to kind of chat through what could be causing this, and then can you give them homework or whatever to get out there to try to keep themselves more flowed?
Sometimes we'll pull tarot cards to help us guide the conversation. Typically, some sessions last 3 hours because, we just dive into it. We come out of session, we sit and we talk, we journal, we distill what it is, where it's sitting, where it's feeling in the body. We go back in, we clear it a little bit. And some things take a while to clear. And it doesn't always happen in one session. I'm not going to make promises that, you come to me and boom, poof, you're perfect. You are perfect. But there's going to be some things that it takes time. And that is one of the reasons that people come back to me. They're like, oh, okay. I feel like that dissolved, but it's still there. I'm like, okay, let's dig deeper. Let's go further into the corners of the basement where we can clear stuff out and pack it off.
I'm reminded that we are perfect human beings, and perfect human beings are filled with flaws.
Yes.
Right. That's how we got made. Annie, we are almost out of time. So Annie Baker Atwood, Reiki Master, tell everybody where they can find you, and if you're on any social media or anything, go ahead and include that too.
Yes, you can find me at www.redbootsreiki.com. You can find me at redbootsreiki@gmail.com. And I am also on YouTube, and I do my Reiki to the Rescue every week. And I it lasts less than a minute and a half, and it will give you some Reiki to think about.
Oh, that's really cool. I did not know about that. Reiki to the Rescue. I think I will look for that. Reiki to the
Rescue. Yeah,
on
go
YouTube.
Find me.
Okay.
Yeah, on YouTube.
Reiki Master, Annie Baker Atwood. It's a pleasure as always. Our time always goes by so quickly, but I always keep the door open for you to join us again. So thank you for being with us, and thank you all who tuned in today. I am Ross Morasso. Until next time.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.